Good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Rise and shine. It's a beautiful Monday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
Very important to underscore the fact that it's a new week. Yeah.
Absolutely. Another week, another pending fuel queues.
Is it pending or active?
Impending. Okay, well, yeah, it's always been there. I'm just hoping that this week will not be the week of fuel scarcity yet again. And we thought it was a fluke, right? 2 weeks ago, last week, and I was tempted to ask someone during the week in a pidgin, where on earth they get this petrol? Just to put a funny slant to it, because it's not funny at all, and it just raises questions about the capabilities of those who have been put in charge of this sector. I mean, it's meant to be a simple process, right? And what we heard from the scratch was that this was as a result of the adulterated petrol or off-spec petrol or bad fuel, whatever they've called it, saying that the methanol content was way too much than the specifications, which is why they called it off-spec. So that was the thinking, right? And that was 3 weeks ago, if I'm correct. And you expected that from the things we heard, that it's been quarantined, isolated, it's been taken away from the supply chain, everything was going to be moving smoothly, because you imagine it's just a block. So you pull it out and then the supply continues, but then you start hearing things like supply cuts and the rest, that we're planning to get 2 billion liters into the country. We have 1 billion liter already in stock, so no cause for concern. But still, there isn't a filling station you go to and expect that you get petrol, except by the stroke of luck. And I think we're not taking that seriously enough. Thankfully, we got to ask some of these questions, because we've questioned the NNPC. We're still questioning the NNPC. But we thought, okay, they said standards, right? We didn't quite check the petrol. So how about we find out from Standards Organization of Nigeria? And in that interview with Mr. Ladi Akeredolu-Ali, it became clear that, interestingly, the SON is not at the ports. Now, there'll be questions about whether or not the NDL, rather, not the NDLE. Oh, goodness, forgive me this morning. The NDLE is somewhere in that head. I'm still stuck at that point, but that aside for now. The SON, and there'll be questions about whether or not we need the SON back at the ports, because now that they're not at the ports, you know how long it takes to get, those things cleared and all. So are they asking to be back? But you know what? Take a listen to this interview with Ladi Akeredolu-Ali, and I'll be back.
The adulterated product you mentioned, there are certain ways this could have been addressed. First, we have independent accredited firms overseas, where every manufactured product has to go through them, so they can certify who produced it, they can certify the product is up to standard. So ideally, these 4 companies that imported the oil, they could have gone through that route, where they can ask an IAF like Ecotechna, SGS, or Intertech to say, okay, this is the oil we are going to bring to Nigeria, can you check it for us? Then they will check it and say, okay, they give them a SONCAP certificate, and they bring it. On the other hand, when they bring it in here, DPR, which is the regulator in the oil industry, which is the NDPR now, the new organization, ideally, they were supposed to, that would be the area where they can check. Now, we have the ability to check those products in Nigeria. In our Oba complex, we have a lab that can do that easily. So we are trying to work on a collaboration now with the DPR, where we will be able to help them. If the product is already in Nigeria, they can bring it to us within a few minutes. We can tell them what the contents are. But the standards are already set. All those adulterated items like methanol and all that are clearly stated in the standards. So essentially, standard organization can help if we collaborate, but it's not an exclusive area where we can accept responsibility. In addition to the fact that also, if we happen to be at the ports when these products are coming in, we could easily say, okay, hold on, wait a minute. This tanker bringing this oil, we're going to take a sample, we'll take it to our lab, check it, and then alert DPR and say, hey, this product is below standard. We are not at the port. So we don't have the ability, even if we are allowed to do it, to go into the ports and check these items. And that's one of the reasons why we keep insisting. 85% of the products coming into this country come through the ports. We need to be there
So yeah, that's SON saying they need to be there. And I know that there will be a lot of debate over whether or not the SON should be at the ports or not. But have we been able to find a solution to this, fuel crisis?
Well, the attention that we are drawing this morning is to even look at the entire process, the entire cycle. And I think enough call has been made to those issues. The question is, are those issues now getting due attention? Excuse me, that's one way to look at this matter, because if there are supposed to be standards and they are not, and somehow those standards have been breached one way or another from what is clear to us now, then there are questions as to where did we miss that. This is just one example. Remember the lawmaker that said on the floor of the House, just imagine that this was jet fuel. Just right there, you're about to take off, and all of those, God forbid that those things, happen. So that's on the one hand. Now, the standards that he spoke about, we had 3 standards for fuel. Is it 2 or 3 standards for fuel in this country before? At what point did we just capsize all of those? There was super, there was premium, there was, I don't know whether those are just the only 2. There was, all those things were there, and then depends on the kind of car that you used. So for people to get into some, fuel station and they have their cars destroyed and all those things. Look, my point here, Kadi, is the entire spectrum has been laid out for us all. The entire spectrum of the cycle of the fuel supply chain has been laid out for us all now. Now we see, now we know. Remember the interview we had with the petrol marketers as well, those who dispense at the fuel stations?
Ipman and Petron.
And yes, they also said that as far as they are concerned, no, I think that's Petron. They said that they also have a way that they test fuel. How come that thing didn't happen before it went into their tanks? That's another issue. Remember that question that I've been asking, that same question. I still don't have clarity to it. So there are tanks that they have dumped these fuels into. How are they going to remove? Is there just a nylon that they'll just carry out and so all of the fuel is taken away from the tank? Is there a leak underground that's going to take out, the bad fuel, what we call bad fuel, adulterated fuel, contaminated fuel, whatever word you want to use? Is there a leak that leaks it out? How is it going to be taken out? Is that being done? Has that been done? So in the fuel stations that had this bad fuel, how do they get reprieve if there's any such terms and conditions and all of those things? The entire spectrum for me of the entire value chain has been laid out for us. The drop downs, the let downs in each of these parts of the cycle are the things that I believe that we should look at, so that we do not find ourselves in this same quagmire. It's disturbing, Cardiff.
And it's taking too long.
It's already taking too long. It's very, very, the same way people are complaining about the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. For God's sake, everything that needs to be done has been done. Why do we delay? The Petroleum Industry Act, we chewed on it like chewing gum for how many decades? And then we have what we have. And even at that, President still sent some amendments in. So, I don't know. It means that we can do what we want to do. The question is, why are we not doing those things?
So this is a call to essentially the regulators. Let's get on the streets. I remember at those times we'll see the DPR moving from filling station to filling station saying, oh, do you have stock? Why aren't you selling? In fact, sometimes you see them selling for the filling station and then remit the monies back. So we need to have those agencies back on the road, okay? We have the PIA, so things should be quite easier. Get them back on the road, ensure that we restore sanity, because I can tell you this, a lot of people have lost livelihoods as a result of this. They have lost so much in this past few weeks, 2 weeks or thereabouts, that we've had this fuel crisis. And I think that it's high time that the agencies did what they are meant to do and do it very well, because why do we have government?
You said, talking about government, so there's a role for the federal government. There are roles for the state government as well.
In this one,
in whatever situation.
Don't forget, we're still battling state police, Amotekun, or
don't even get me started on that. So now we have, the experience in Lagos is one. I understand that there is some reprieve in Abuja. The queues are still there, but maybe at least now you can get fuel. In the Lagos, you can almost say the same thing. But whether or not the fuel sell as and when they auto sell, that's another matter entirely. So let's know what's going on in your own state. This is what the report that you just saw now in Bayelsa State. So what is it? What's your own experience been in your part of this country, Nigeria? concerning, getting fuel or not getting fuel. Are there areas where we were told that the fuel are selling for something in the region of 600 naira, 700 naira per liter? So let's
and then you pay 500 naira entry fee and then exit fee again. It's just mind-boggling. But you know what?
I don't believe what you just said.
Absolutely true story. You buy for above the official pump price, you pay 500 naira on top, and then when you're about to maybe drive out or exit, the guy at the gates will waylay you and say, hey.
Please let's know what your own experience is, okay? Send us a mail or, tweet at us at Channels TV or at Sunrise Daily Now on our Twitter handle. Okay, I don't know if some of the issues we've raised here now are part of what you'll find on the front pages of the papers today, but let's take a look. All right, let's take a look at some of the issues on the front pages this morning. And I'd love to begin with the daily test that actually speaks to the fuel scarcity, but we'll come to that later. The Nigerian Tribune has this one on its front page. 6 days to APC convention, uncertainty over delegates list. I thought at some point you and Chamberlain were talking about some list last week.
Wow.
Just say.
Wow. Okay.
Say.
Let me just try to remember. It's called is it the Unity list?
Yeah, something like that.
So Chamberlain mentioned that, and I was wondering what it meant.
Oh, really?
Just to clarify my role in that conversation.
Just because he's not here right now.
And my question was, so if there's no Unity list, does that mean there will be disunity? But hey, that's what you have.
Well,
right there.
I guess that same question is on the front page. The writer's consensus Unity list won't be acceptable to Buhari. Is that
there goes the Unity list.
The Unity list. Well, that's ascribed to Mustafa. Find out who said that. And concerned aspirants ask party leadership to postpone convention. Well, the rumors have been there. Whether or not it's going to happen, that's another issue altogether.
I mean, it doesn't look like it. 26th is what, this Saturday?
26th is this Saturday.
Yeah, so I don't know. Except there's going to be some. But you know what they say in politics. But from where I sit right now, because I'm not in politics, it doesn't look like it. But hey, anything can happen.
Well, there are many other stories on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, right above the nameplate, 3 of them, but let's look at this one. Thousands of imported vehicles trapped at seaports over VIN valuation. VIN is vehicle identification number. Why is that the issue? Find out the details on page 7 and several other stories on the front page of the paper today.
All right. I was just stuck at that story about medical professionals give divergent views on COVID-19 vaccine production. You recall that Nigeria was part of the countries in Africa to get technology for mRNA vaccine production. So it'll be quite an interesting read, page 5, because there's been a lot of clamor for vaccine equity and the rest. So, I mean, page 5 of the Nigerian Tribune. But let's turn our attention to the Guardian newspaper for you this morning. The Guardian leads with air travel, and it localizes it. And you see, there you go. Local airlines struggle with depleted fleet, low market penetration. There was some, fracas or rancor over the weekend regarding the airlines. So you see, the riders, over 48 aircraft grounded. Operators lease 12 to sustain local operation. High maintenance costs, Jet A1, exchange rate, hobble industry growth. Aero contractors struggles with staff salary. The FG fails in pledges to deliver local maintenance organization, a leasing company's 6th year on. It is time to save sector from collapse, say operators. So, I mean, it's so much happening in that sector, and it's a very, very important one. I mean, and that's a sector that is just sort of recovering from COVID-19 and what it brought along with it, and still the locals saying they're going through a lot. I mean,
it is very, very disturbing, especially when you find out that that's one sector, one of the alternative transportation modules, routes, platforms that people use in the country. And then there are those who, if they are struggling with the kind of things that we're talking about now, I wonder if ever we'll get to the point where we can use air travel for cargo and rescue the roads a little.
Okay.
That costs.
Absolutely, because now that it's mainly human, you see how much challenge. And it's quite interesting. If the airlines are at the receiving end of this, imagine what will happen to you and I I mean, there's a lot of complaints about customer service, communication back and forth, refunds when they're meant to be refunds. And now that they're going through this, I just imagine that it will get worse. But you see, after sharing 45 billion naira, FCT primary schools remain shut. I mean, we've paid attention to that story time and again. The fact that primary schools in the FCT are shut. There's a strike currently ongoing, and looks like it's not even letting. It's a page 2 read of The Guardian this morning. There's a couple of other stories on the front page. Let's look there for The Guardian. Good morning, Malkwe.
Good morning, gentlemen. Well, let's take a look at what the Abuja Inquirer has for you. Yes, indeed. There is some report on the situation of petrol here in the Federal Capital Territory. Look at this one. The lead story is from local government workers, though. Release December allocation for our salaries. Hold your council chairs allocation with them. That's from the FCTA. So there is some back and forth between the FCTA and Nolge. But looking at the story I was telling you about, respite for Abuja residents as fuel queues thin out. That's also on the front page, just on top of the nameplate. Indeed, the queues are still there somewhat. Maybe people are still, maybe it's just the early morning rush, because I saw a few queues this morning, but it was not as bad. It was nowhere compared to where we were last week. So it's certainly better than where we were last week. Refugee Commission spent 185 billion naira on IDPs in Northeast Bakassi returnees. You find details on page 3. And look at this story. It broke over the weekend. Kenya's High Commissioner to Nigeria, who's 65 years old, dies in Abuja. That was a very sad one that came through over the weekend. So page 11 read for you there. Federal government to train 45,000 teachers on digital literacy is also on the front page. And there is this special, I felt IVF was a sin before God. It's on page 13 of the paper. They also have sports on the back page for you, just in case you're interested in sports. Winter Olympics end with calls for peace, which is why they were founded in the first instance. Let us leave it there for the Abuja Inquirer.
Now, Daily Trust newspaper has this one on its front page. I don't even know what to make of it. Remember that Daily Trust has kept a countdown, rather it's a count, well, a count of the number of days, weeks, or months, even years that children have spent in captivity. This one is like an update. 8 months after abduction, 13 Yori schoolgirls married off to bandits. You may want to find out what that means, really. 3 pregnant students released to parents. I don't even know what to make of that, you know.
And don't forget Leah Sharibo as well. It's been 4 years.
Jeez. Over 10 captives still with abductors. 12-year-old Bendel, 12-year-old Bethel student remains in captivity. We're working for their release. Find the story on page 5. That counts. The school children in captivity count that Daily Trust has been doing. Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, 233 days after. The children are still in captivity. Look at the timeline of FGC Bernie Yori kidnapping. That's what you have in the graphics on the front page of the paper this morning. 13 female students married to bandits. 1 boy remains with captives. And on like that. Don't forget that we still have teachers also in captivity. But all of the stories you'll find on the inside pages of Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Right up under the graphics, APC to postpone convention over unresolved crisis. Well, you may want to find out what that is about. Stories on page 14. So it's now like APC convention, to be or not to be. Well, the details you'll find there. Some of you may find this interesting. It's right under the nameplate. Tons of pomo can cause deadly diseases imported to Nigeria, ascribed to NAFDAC. That's the Daily Trust newspaper. This
Well, New Telegraph is next. The this morning, because I imagine a lot of people say, don't even go there. Okay, that's a holy grail for some people. But you know, New Telegraph is next with this one. Presidency, after Muslim, Christian should take over in 2023. That's credited to Khan. As both religions are critical partners in Nigeria, says it'll mobilize Christians to produce Buhari's successor. Rejects Muslim, Christian ticket. Page 2, you know, there will always be different angles in the build-up to the election. And I imagine that, you know, insecurity, I mean, for example, the Yari students, Leah Sharibu and the rest, will be part of the campaign promises because, I mean, this government used that, I mean, in the build-up to the last election. And you wonder just how much of that have they met the target?
We should even be discussing, I don't know, this is just me, of what governance imperative is religion. We have said, the Constitution says there is no state religion. That's the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Are we aware that we have major religions in the country? Yes. But then should Christian organizations or Muslim organizations should be coming out, should that conversation be on their lips? I don't know. Maybe I'm just being idealist, but we know what the Constitution says.
Well, you know how it works. You would always speak for your constituency, right? I mean, even the North Central will say, hey, you should come here. Southeast says, well, it should come to the Southeast.
North Central said they're even more qualified.
You know, Southwest will say, well, it is our turn. Okay, just let us have it. So I think it's part of the build-up. But New Telegraph talks about the 5 days to APC convention, saying members say that they don't know what's going on. You see, we don't know what's going on. Members, YC, CPC is afraid to approach Aso Page 3. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
Let's look at what Vanguard is saying this morning. They also have some, some exclusive for you on the front page. APC National Convention, Buhari mulls disbandment of CECPC. That's attributed to a source. That's what the president could be thinking. Buhari governors meet on Tuesday. February 26 date, no longer feasible. Aspirants write Buni. CECPC doesn't want to disenfranchise members contesting by-elections, that's according to a party leader. Governors divided over chairmanship, presidential aspirants. Sani Musa, Abdullahi Adamu, Dogara, Al-Makura's camps emerge. Imo APC factions clash over move to postpone convention. INEC can't be doing convention by elections same time. That's according to Uzodimma's faction. There's nothing to show they want to conduct convention. That's from Wanfo-led faction. So there is a lot going on around politics in the APC. But this is a lead headline on the front page of the Vanguard. APC National Convention, Buhari mulls disbandment of CECPC. 2023, I'm ready to get dirty. That's from Tinubu. It's a page 10 read. And just in case you're also interested, Abba Kyari, IRT coordinators, team leaders to be redeployed. That story is also on the front page. Trade deficit with China worsens with $23 billion imports in 2021. Exports lag behind $23 billion imports. LCCI, Nasima, CPPE blame China aid poor production base. Well, that's what we have on the front page of the Vanguard.
Well, I guess that's the much we can take of the papers this morning. For those of you who will protest about Mr. and Mrs., it's not me, it's Markwe.
Just say from me.
We'll be right back after now to take on the issues for the day.
This is a special press briefing called by a coalition of over 70 civil society organizations which make up the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room to express their displeasure over the non-assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill by President Buhari, despite the reworking by the National Assembly.
I know members of the press may have one or two questions.
INEC is empowered by law to release the notice for general elections at least a year before its conduct. However, members of civil society organizations are apprehensive that February 22nd, 2022 will make it exactly a year to the 2023 general elections, and without a proper law to govern its conduct, the elections might be in jeopardy.
Of the Electoral Bill 2022 requires that to issue, it requires INEC to issue notice of election not later than 360 days before the day appointed for an election. As indicated by INEC, the scheduled date for the 2023 presidential election and National Assembly election is February 18, 2023. However, if the president acts on the bill after the 22nd February 2022, the date for the 2023 election and other subsequent elections, all the activities might be affected.
The group is also exploring other ways to compel the president, like staging a protest if the president fails to assent to the bill.
The next step for us within the remit of what we can do as civil society will be to, of course, explore the possibility of protests and also the lobbying that you talked about.
While applauding the National Assembly for correcting the issues of drafting errors and cross-referencing raised by civil society organizations, the group says there is a correction which is more about its interpretation.
We're happy to report that 98% of all the drafting errors and the cross-referencing gaps have been resolved based on the transmitted version of the bill that we have reviewed. There's just one clause in particular that is yet to be resolved, but that again is also a subject of interpretation.
The group insists that it will continue to lobby and urge President Buhari to sign the bill without further delay.
Well, that's basically what we're talking about this morning. This week, the civil society organizations, which you see there, are now saying that they're going to start what they term a week of action because they say that delay in signing the Electoral Act could jeopardize what could come up in 2023. The question is, how is that going to happen? We have with us this morning Mr. Austin Aigbe, who is a Senior Program Officer, Center for Democracy and Development. We also have joining us via Zoom Dr. Sam Amadi, who is a Director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. And in Lagos, we have Professor Paul Ananaba, who's a Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Gentlemen, welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Welcome.
Let me start quickly with you, Mr. Aigbe. I'm sure that your CSO was a part of the coalition of CSOs which spoke on Friday on the president's delay in signing the Electoral Act. Why are you so worried about this?
For many reasons. We've got to the point that it's almost a certain that President Buhari just don't want to sign the electoral bill. If he declined this time, it will be the 6th time since becoming president of Nigeria. We are worried because the antecedent is clear that President Buhari maybe doesn't like an improvement in the electoral architecture. With the complaint made, all the refusal to assent last year, and all the issues he raised had been addressed.
Why do you think that the president doesn't want to sign? I mean, he has 30 days from when it is transmitted to him, doesn't he?
You're right. I mean, 2018, he had that 30 days, and there was this back and forth until December of 2018, when he said, well, we are too close to election. I mean, based on ECOWAS protocol, we cannot go ahead to use a new bill, a new act to run an election. And the election was February of 2019. So what the president was to hide under the ECOWAS protocol. Last year, you also know that in spite of the enormous resources that went into designing that bill, the president came back after 31 days. After 31 days. It was on this station I said that the last day, which was 30 days, fell on a Sunday. He still got one more day, which is a Monday. And that Monday was when he responded that, well, I won't go ahead to sign because of these issues. And thankfully, there was a lot of permutation that the National Assembly should just override and move on. However, the National Assembly, based on maybe wisdom, they reversed themselves and said, well, we are ready to go ahead with the president. We need to correct all of the things that the president said, that the direct primaries was too expensive based on security challenge in the country. Giving political party one option of selecting a candidate was an uphill task. There was need to include indirect primaries and, of course, consensus provision. And it was on your interview at the beginning of the year that the president, and he was specifically asked, will you sign when those corrections are made? And the president said, yes, I will sign when there is indirect, when there is consensus. Now we have those provisions in the bill. So why is the president taking more than 5 days to sign? I mean, it's this curiosity that is bringing all of this to the table.
Let me ask Dr. Samamadi, do you also share this anxiety of the president delaying in signing the Electoral Act?
Because usually, presidents don't veto bills that they have serious issues. So the point is that the president, maybe one can argue with some degree of that is not a fan, or he thinks probably the Electoral Acts are okay, and therefore some of these improvements are not necessarily what he wants. But clearly, presidents sign off on the bills with ceremony once they land on the table. And usually, also presidential veto comes clear. Everybody knows exactly that the president will not sign this bill. The president had communicated when the bill was being deliberated that he was not going to sign the bill. So that's the process of veto. It's principle, and it's usually around ideology. So if the president has not signed any of these bills for the last 3 or 4 times, and again, some of the legislators were wisely too use these bills as a ping pong for personal interest. For example, why bring the provision around disqualification of persons who are appointees? Does the work of an appointee override the work of a president? So if there's somebody who's an incumbent in governor current election, why should you disqualify an appointee from partaking in primary, etc.? So those foolish actions that are self-serving now fits into perhaps a president who is not a fan. Let's be fair, charitable. Maybe he would have signed off if there were no such complications. But the National Assembly continues to make laws with so much self-interest and make them as if they are making meat pie. They keep cutting and adding whatever they like. It should have been principled debate, and once the president returned to them, they should have just removed the direct primary and sign off on the bill. Now, they started complications, but primarily, evidence shows that this president is not a fan. Don't forget that Yar'Adua came and established a committee. Usually, electoral reforms are president executive bill. So the president should have been the one in the last 2 tenures, should have been the one who shepherds the bills in the National Assembly, who puts his presidential power behind it and drive everybody to sign it off, because that ought to have been a presidential project. Now it's coming from civil society and legislators and INEC especially, and the president has been picking faults here and there. So maybe he still has a few days, probably he could sign off because of other important provisions. The consensus is critical to the president of the APC. So we have not yet lost full hope. Politics might still save this bill. Who knows?
Okay, let's ask Professor Ananaba whether the president is in a bind here, because Dr. Madi says that the lawmakers keep tampering with the bill like they're making meat pie. I don't know that meat pie likes to be tampered with, but let's hear the thoughts of Professor Ananaba on this.
Well, it's a matter that will give every Nigerian some concern. The power of the masses is in their votes, and those votes are exercised in properly conducted elections. It's only if one is not part of this country that you will not get some concern if at this stage we are not certain as to which law, which regulatory framework will govern the elections. And that is why in the previous elections you have huge election petitions that take so much money, takes time, leads even violence, because the Electoral Act ought to have been in place by now. I'm not here to talk about who should be blamed, but I know that whoever ought to be blamed already knows. So it's not my business to say who should be blamed, but Nigerians should be able to find out. Doing table tennis with National Assembly, the executive and all that, that is not what I think Nigerians need to do today or need to see. I also appreciate that the National Assembly did not go head on when there was a refusal to sign or to assent to the bill. The National Assembly backtracked and, effected amendment. Even if there were clauses that became objectionable after that backtracking, that first backtracking shows that there is a willingness to deal and move forward. I would have expected that the executive team and the legislative team should hold a few days retreat on this bill and then get it signed. Now, what we are doing is gradually heating up the polity. Now, it's, the civil society is going to hold rally. It's going to cost money, it's going to cost time, and we don't know. The rally may become violent, for example, and you're going to become destructive. It's in a situation where there is fuel crisis. There's a situation where airlines are saying we're going to increase, and you cannot go easily on the roads today. Cooking gas, food, and all that. So Nigerians vote and partake in governance on their own part by the social contract, expecting that those that have voted will be patriotic, will want to do things that will affect the masses.
Are you saying, my apologies, Prof, are you saying by any chance that the protest being proposed by a coalition of civil society organizations may not achieve any desired...
No, I mean, it's not new. It's not new. The civil societies will only protest.
So you don't see any bite to the protest? How
much bite has come from even NLC strikes and all the strikes up and all everywhere? As we speak, it's on 1 month one strike. What has happened? So this is the trajectory we are coming from. And let's not theorize most of these things. Yes, there will be protests, and after that, what? In my place, my village, we were taught as children that it is the oath taken by the debtor that is more important. It is the oath of the debtor.
In this case, who is the debtor?
In English language, you will not get the meaning. You get it completely. It is when the debtor says, I will pay on son. So that is the one that's important. Not the creditor.
So I imagine from that analogy, Prof, the president is the one owing Nigerians assent to this bill. Am I right?
It is the president. If the president says, yes, I will sign, will the problem not be over?
Okay.
But he already said he would sign.
What version did he say he would sign?
No, but you heard in our interview earlier this year, which was also referenced by the CC demand, that the president said if those changes are effected, he would sign.
The point is the way we manage even information and all that. Up till now, we should have an insight whether the president will sign or not. We don't have that insight. We're only expecting that the 30 days of Section 58 is running out, and we are not hearing anything.
Some have spoken about the body language of the Attorney General. He had an interview on our sister program, Politics Today, and I've heard people say his body language appears as though he will advise the president against signing it. So there's that body language, but that's the best we have. Do you think that not hearing anything means that maybe the president is taking Nigerians for granted on this?
I don't think so. I think that, you know, a lot of things happen in governance, but I think that this anxiety is not necessary. I mean, put everybody holding their breath, looking at the electoral bill. I mean, 360 days, and you must give notice and all that. Going to restructure the timings for the elections now will also affect so much. That's what I was trying to say. And that is why many times, remember that election petitions must be within 180 days. A lot of things about election are streamlined.
They have time frames.
They have time frames. So if you begin to tinker with the timing, a lot more problems that may not have been intended, unintended, and intended will now begin to show up. We shouldn't at this time as a country be vacillating. By now, the laws should be very clear. Remember, INEC will also roll out guidelines.
So all of that is being delayed as a result of this.
Exactly, and that's why you see sometimes INEC is saying, we are going to be in trouble. Simply, that's my understanding.
Okay.
If this bill is not signed into law immediately.
Okay, well, Dr. Madi, are you as concerned about the timeline as well as Professor Anadaba is, concerning this? Of course, it's one of the premises upon which the civil society organizations are also speaking. The timeline is important if we're to get the elections running as and when due. Do you think this concern is understood by those people who are part of the process of helping the president sign this bill?
Actually, legal provisions, they are not clear. So it gives anxiety concerning, how the electoral management body will behave. But again, let me make it very clear. I think that INEC has the law to guide it now. As a matter of fact, the too much investment in the new Electoral Act arises from, in my view, a misunderstanding about administrative law principles. For example, most of the notable improvement INEC has brought, beavers, use of technology, and so on and so forth, are things that INEC, as today, has the legal competence to do. I've argued long ago, in 2019, that INEC is primarily a regulatory agency that has the power of rulemaking, and that INEC has got enough authorization in the Constitution to roll out these changes and these innovations that will help election. And even the 2010 Electoral Act, that's the one that's still operative, as amended, still provides enough cover. So what has happened over the years has been two things have happened. One, there has been a gross misunderstanding by senior lawyers, and I've also deceived the courts, to think that INEC is merely a transactional agency. INEC just runs logistics, provide election. But INEC is primarily a regulator, and that's its first job is to rulemaking. So the Constitution says INEC should conduct election free and fair. That's the democratic theory of election. So INEC has the power, therefore, to put together everything, roll out rules through due process, notice and comments, put that in the register. We're going to make this rule. And then people make comments, INEC conducts public hearing, and INEC establish those rules. Those rules are as valid as if made by the National Assembly. So there's too much faith or hope on a new electoral law. I don't share those premises. I think that INEC has constituted if it works its rulemaking process well, if it develops a business rule that allows everybody to participate, and therefore it goes to a due process and establish these guidelines on beavers, on electronic transmission, and any other innovation it considers reasonable. No script court properly guided all over the world. The rules are very established that the courts must defer to a regulatory agency in rolling out and executing those functions as long as they act legally. And thankfully, not in the Constitution or the Electoral Act today disables INEC from expressly taking decisions. So
Dr. Mahdi, your submissions, pardon me, your submissions would imply then that the National Assembly, the whole National Assembly, actually used taxpayers' money to embark on a futile exercise to amend this Electoral Act and get a clean one that empowers electronic transmission of results, rejection of results declared under duress and the rest. So, I mean, that's the implication. But let me just quickly take this to Mr. Igbe to respond to that. So, Mr. Igbe, I mean, from Dr. Mahdi's submissions, it will sound as though INEC really has all it needs now. So do you agree that this whole process was futile, trying to get an Electoral Act amendment bill to guide future elections in Nigeria?
Yeah, that was a very fantastic question you asked. I beg to a bit distance from my very senior Oga, Dr. Sam Amadi. The fact of the matter is that we've had precedents that INEC have been innovative. The innovation within the INEC is not new. As a participant in the electoral process, we know that INEC has come up with a lot of innovation that has improved on the electoral process. But here we are face to face with Supreme Court judgment that eventually nullify those innovations. For example, in 2016 elections in Edo State, where there were a lot of issues that pertaining to smart card figures. I mean, accreditation of voters using the smart card. Whereas on the register of voters, you have more voters. On the smart card reader, you have less of those votes. And that case went from the tribunal up to Supreme Court. For participants in that process, we know that the Supreme Court nullified that the smart card reader was not known to law. And meanwhile, it's an improvement. If you also know, when Professor Jega appeared before the National Assembly to talk about the smart card reader, he was emphatic because the National Assembly wanted to kill the smart card reader innovation. Professor Jega said the whole idea of smart card reader was not to take away the voter register because that is the grand norm provided for in our laws. The innovations in INEC are super exciting, they are good, but they need some level of backing. And as one who has followed this process, if you look at 2019 election, INEC talked about server. Were we not in this country? When INEC talked about transmission of results from polling units, and that was going to converge in one server, but the Supreme Court nullified that process. And in fact, INEC is right now trying to organize its own processes with the introduction of the IRF, the result viewing portal of INEC, that all polling unit results from EC8A are transmitted electronically, are pasted, where participants, citizens, voters can go on that portal and download their polling unit to verify. We are not still where we want to get to. If you then do from EC8A, INEC up to this moment has not come up with a provision to upload from EC8B, from EC8C, from EC8D. We need to be able to upload the collation of results at the world level. We need to upload the one at the local government level. We need to upload the one at the state level, so we can follow up the trajectory and then say, wow, this process is transparent. But we need the law. We need this law to back this innovation. If this law is not passed, I mean, my brother Sam Amadi talked about what I wanted to just quickly speak to about appointees of government. Let's be fair. As a participant, when you are a governor or a president, you have ministers and commissioners. They become automatic delegates in a primary election, particularly in indirect primaries. What it means, if I am to contest with you you already have a lot of vote ahead of you, then it makes me incapacitated. There is no fair play. If we must clean up our political environment, we must create a fair, transparent, and credible process that makes sure that the place is fair enough to compete. That it was the wisdom that National Assembly came up with with the direct primaries mandatorily. But again, people say no, this will not help. And then now we have gone back. I mean, just also quickly put, it was the Senate leader. It was the Senate leader that represented the bill that we are now talking about, which presupposed that for every executive bill coming to Senate comes through the Senate leader. I want to assume that it was the president or the Minister of Justice who would have had a conversation with the Senate leader to make those provision, to make that submission. Otherwise, I will be curious that it's taking the president too much of time. President Buhari need to just sign this. In 2015 January, President Buhari at Transcorp Hilton, while we're signing the peace deal, President Buhari criticized former President Goodluck Jonathan for not signing the electoral bill. That he quoted that before 2023 there was a bill, before 2007 there was a bill, before 2011 there was a bill, that there was no bill before 2015. And now we are talking about 2023. There was no bill in 2019. There is no bill in 2023. And President Buhari is now sitting on that seat that he once criticized. He should sign the bill, and let's move with a new regime that will improve our landscape.
Well, I mean, interesting argument you put forward, Mr. Igbe, but we need to go on a break now. This is the sixth time that this amendment will be before President Buhari. He has given his word that he will sign it, but there will be questions as to what happens if the president reneges on his promise. We'll go on this break and come back to take a look at other dimensions to this. Please stay with us. You're welcome back. The National Assembly transmitted the re-amended bill to the President on January the 31st. Today being February the 21st means that 21 days have gone. We have 9 more days to go for President Buhari to assent to this bill or otherwise. So let's continue our conversation. We still have with us Professor Paul Ananaba, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, right here in our Lagos studio, as well as Dr. Sam Amadi, the Director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, joining us via Zoom, and Mr. Austin Igbe, the Senior Program Officer of CDD. But let me come to Professor Paul Ananaba. You've said earlier that, I mean, we've seen protests in the past from civil society, labor, and this has not achieved much. That would raise questions about maybe government's attitude to clamors, from the citizenry. But it would look like on this case, there's an overwhelming desire to have this passed into law. And this has been a long time coming, 2015. Is this a case of the president knowing what is best for Nigerians, or Nigerians knowing what is best for them?
Well, it's not a question of yes and no. There may be information available to the president where we may not be disposed to. And there's also the citizens' right to insist on what they want. But that happens where both sides are playing their roles patriotically. There are incidents of leadership. There are security reports and all that the president sees. But that's why a leader must have confidence and trust. Must be somebody that the followers or the led will believe at every point. And that's why you see when there is failure of that psychological content, there is then no leadership. Having said that, it is good to protest. It is good to speak out. It is good to make views known. Because sometimes the president may not also know exactly what the citizens feel, except they speak. He's not a magician. In the context of what we're talking about, the Electoral Act is far too serious than any other thing. And I do not agree that INEC has all the powers to do all that it ought to do. Mr. Igbe was on point, and that's clear. I think it's saying that it is senior lawyers and all that. is not acceptable to me. I am a practitioner of what we are discussing. Innovation without legal framework is a wasted exercise. A lot of funds, a lot of lives, a lot of time will go into waste of time. Because as we speak, the card reader is innovative, as the Sprinkle said, but what are you going to do with it? So it's important that we don't continue with this easy and uncertain legal framework. Check from 2001 till now. We have been going through the same exercise. So people now have to rush to the court to get interpretation at each point. I don't know whether you have an idea of how many election petitions that go on in this country. Why should it be?
Well, INEC is empowered, pardon me, to make regulations, guidelines for elections. So, where does that fall? Because that also has its own bearing on elections.
Those guidelines are subsidiary legislation. They don't override substantive laws. For example, we were talking about the electronics content. The Electoral Act doesn't cover them, just like the card reader. You make the regulation, yes, go with your regulation, but will it determine the election? So the point being made is simple, that why are we running away from having a clear, I'm not even in support of 2010 amendment, Electoral Act as amended. What are we amending? Let us have a clear Electoral Act.
Okay. Well, Dr. Amadi, I suspect you may want to respond to what Professor Ananaba has just spoken now, and also speak to the challenge of the timeline that the law, makes very clear. There are those who are saying, of course, naturally, the law is very clear. The number of days that INEC has to come up with guidelines, the number of days, which according to, of course, the law, we all know that it has to be done as quickly as possible. If the timeline that INEC set for February 18 or thereabout next year is to hold any water, and the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, the President still has until 2nd of March, beg your pardon, to sign. So those timelines are not very friendly to each other. CSOs are saying sign by 22nd or thereabout, or else, the timelines are going to be endangered. So speak to all of these issues, and what should we really be looking at? What are the options before Nigerians?
I didn't say the new act is useless. I would say INEC does have powers to do those innovations that the CDC person said. Yes, that's what I'm saying. INEC can be innovative. Those innovations are legally backed up. And let me respond to Anonymous. Clearly, I think many Nigerian lawyers and some judges really need to update on administrative law. Subsidiary and principal enactment, if they conflict, the point is the Constitution has given INEC this power, the Electoral Act has given the power. Now, the case of the Supreme Court and the card reader is that the Supreme Court says that this technological innovation will not conflict with the fact that the law says that the basis of accreditation is a manual that they smart card that will not override the register. So the point is that that decision does not say that INEC has no power to do innovation. It's that those innovations will not detract from the express provision of the law. And the point I'm making is very simple. The whole thing INEC has done, the technology around it, derived from their power to regulate conduct of election. So the same powers that INEC had to issue manuals, the same power it has to issue this innovation as part of the free and fair election. So let us flow from this. INEC should step up. By the way, the Supreme Court, the CBN every day issues directives on management of the financial market.
Just to be clear, Dr. Amadi, just 1 second, Dr. Amadi, just to be clear, are you saying that whether the president signs this new bill into law or not, INEC has all the powers that it needs to get the job done?
Exactly. I would say that whether it's paying scientists or not, the powers in the Constitution and the Electoral Act as it exists today enables INEC to carry out those operations it has carried. I would like to have a debate. And by the way, Supreme Court is also a learning court. The problem with our lawyers is that they don't improve jurisprudence. If you look at the US Supreme Court, they have moved several changes depending on the theory of democracy and the law. The whole aspect of election is to enable free and fair. And free and fair is a concept around that you can unpack what makes it free and fair. So my argument is that if the INEC follows the way regulators follow, by very detailed procedure of rulemaking, and show explicitly how those rules derive from the enactment that the National Assembly has already empowered it and the Constitution has empowered it. By the way, the Constitution says that only INEC is exempted from legislative or presidential override when it makes regulations for election.
Okay,
so,
well, let's deal with that part that you said, you know, concerns those who practice the law, the lawyers in the House. So, Prof, you want to speak to some of the issues that he's put?
Prof. Samadi is also a colleague.
Okay.
I hope you know he is also a colleague. I think that the point being made, which I think is being glossed over, is that this often criticism of critics come on legal practitioners and the courts may not be fair. We're talking about Section 49 of the Electoral Act. That's what the Supreme Court was dealing with. We practice that. The point being made, which he agrees with, is that I don't know why the divergence is that you can do FALEC and INEC. You can do manual policy and all that, but it will not override substantive legislation. What we are dealing with here is the substantive legislation, which is the Electoral Act. That's what we're talking about.
But his point here is
his point
just asking
is that you can now go into free, fair, and credible election, and it will now based on that you can do so many other things. But that point being said, from my point, is that there is no judicial discretion outside the law. Otherwise, the law will become as being measured by the feet of the judge.
The point he is making is the law that we have, the Constitution and the existing law that we have, is sufficient for INEC to take all of the initiatives that
it is not correct. If it is correct, then there is no need for any amendment. We shouldn't have been discussing about any bill. It means that INEC can do everything it can. No. I concede a point that there are certain things INEC can do now within the available legislation. But they are not enough, which is why you see the National Assembly and the entire country and the president even saying, no, I won't sign this because of this or that, or I will sign. Now, for example, are you trying to say that electronic voting transmission and all that INEC can within that regime throw that in when Section 49 of the Extant Electoral Act is still alive? So let's limit this discussion to what is helpful to the country. Because if INEC brings up all those good manuals, all the good initiatives, and they are not thoroughly backed by law, they will be struck down by the courts.
Okay.
Now just one point. The point being made is, let us not distract from the point that efforts have been made to bring up an electoral bill. What is stopping us from having that electoral bill into law now? So that INEC can with certainty move on and not move based on INEC's interpretation of what is free and fair.
Okay. Well, Mr. Igwe, there's one of the points that, and I'm sure you want to speak to some other issues, but it's a point that Professor Nanaba made here the other time, that we've had agitations, we've had advocacy and all of those things, and how much have they really done? Protests, how much have they really been able to, how significantly have they been able to impact on getting anything done? So the National Day of Protest that is being called tomorrow, to what end do you see this making any impact on the president signing the bill in record time?
I think the president should do the needful quickly to avoid the National Day tomorrow. It's important. Let's avoid it. Let's not create an environment that will lead to what is unintended. The protest being proposed is a peaceful one. It's an advocacy protest. It is not a violent protest. It is a strategic intervention to just call the president to say, please sign this bill, if we need to use the word please. You will also recall when the Not Young to Run advocacy was ongoing, it was more of a road show, a road advocacy or protest advocacy that led to that ascent. It's important that the president does sign this bill for many reasons. One, of course, is that your colleague talked about declaration of result under duress. INEC tried to stop that in 2019. They did. They made every effort. They suspended the declaration of that result, and the fellow concerned went to court, and the court said, INEC got no power. INEC got no power. Now the power is not in the act. That INEC got the administrative procedure to look at results being declared under duress and then interrogate it and probably go back to from ECHA result, the polling unit result, and recount, and then announce and make a formal declaration. These are innovation. There are many of those. If President Buhari think otherwise with this new provision, we are saying that there is no problem with having those views. Sign the assent to this bill, then propose those amendments and return it back to the National Assembly. We have had that precedent too.
What I'm still not clear on is why CSOs believe or doubt that despite the president having committed himself with his own words in an interview that everyone remembers conducted earlier this year, that he still has no intention of signing the bill. I don't know why CSOs have that.
It's 21 days. It's 21 days. You see, we just got 9 days. 21 days today. I think President Buhari need to shock everyone by assenting today. Let's today, February the 21st, be a National Day of Honor by assenting to that bill.
Because Dr. Amadi made reference to something. He said something about the National Assembly, touching the bill like as if they're making meat pie. I do not know what is inside the bill, apart from putting the including other options of indirect primaries and including the consensus option and defining it. Were there other additions that the public is not aware of?
I think the public is aware. Dr. Amadi also mentioned that. There seems to be, and I also mentioned that in the course of our conversation, political appointees. You go to some state, no election at the local government level, then there are critical committees and chair of those local authorities, and if those chairs exist, the party constitution, majority of the party constitution, allows that chair of local government, political appointees, commissioners, even some senior special advisors are automatic delegates. What this means is that for every ad hoc delegate, you go to the primary election and you select those ad hoc delegates, maybe 1,000 of them. And within that ad hoc delegate, that's where you see the problem of usually when the malfeasance we see with indirect primaries. So you now see the governor or the president having a huge trunk of automatic delegates who have other interests. So one automatic delegate, maybe a super commissioner or a super minister, is able to get 10 of those ad hoc delegates. It adds up to that number of automatic delegates. So it gives an unfair chance to one individual. What this law is saying, that will be no need for those appointees.
So they are still...
And if you must go ahead, if you need to contest election as a political appointee, you must resign ahead of time. And that is a normal. It gives fair chance for everybody.
So what Dr. Amadi was saying about this law being self-serving as well, is not exactly incorrect.
No, I think it is our views. The truth of the matter is that what Dr. Amadi is saying is that on this spectrum of the argument, those political appointees needed to also partake in this process, so they have a fair chance. So the truth of the matter is there is the war, invisible hand of demand and supply within these political actors, one on the executive side and the other on the legislative side. And don't forget, the baton is about to change in 2023. There are certain individuals in National Assembly who may want to become the executive members, and there are people, of course, it's almost becoming a national conversation that the retirement house for governors is the National Assembly. So there seems to be that some governors may be eyeing some seats of National Assembly members, and these guys are saying you got too much advantage. If I must play the role, if I must contest with you at the party primaries, I need a fair advantage. I need a fair ground to do that competition. And for the way the law exists at this material time, I don't have that fair chance. So these guys, knowing that we are not going to use direct primaries, okay, fine. They've gone in. I mean, speaking about National Assembly members now, fair enough. I agree with Dr. Amadi that they are playing their own game, yes, but the executive is also playing their game. So each of them are playing game. But what matter let's go out of this narrative and then look at a fair game narrative. I was involved with student unionism. If you have an unfair chance, you'll never win an election. If the VC support a candidate, it's an uphill task for you as a civil rights activist within the school environment. The same thing goes within the political system. I have worked closely with political party. I know to some degree the nuances of enrichment, where a few people gather in one small room to appoint those who go for party primaries, to make consensus candidates, to say you are going, and I've said in this platform before that even the consensus provision give unfair chance to women political participation. Most of the time, the women are just screened out because consensus never will favor them.
Well, Dr. Amadi too is no stranger to the political process. He's tried to throw his hat in the ring a few times. Dr. Amadi, let me ask you what jeopardy this non-passage of this Electoral Act puts our democracy in. I interviewed a gentleman over the weekend, sometime on Friday, and he was talking about how coups have become quite fashionable in some of our West African neighboring countries, and that Nigeria needs to show an example. Does the non-signage of this Electoral Act put our democracy in jeopardy?
To focus on democracy the way INEC is in fact with political operatives. We see the retirement of very clear-headed persons like Iban or Mike Guinea. So I'm more worried about who is staffing INEC than actually the Electoral Act referring. Professor, I don't have mentioned Section 49. Section 49 has nothing to do with the technology. Simply says you must follow the voter register. Oftentimes, we lawyers create obstacles for regulatory agencies and the court. Let me make it very clear. INEC, this new Electoral Act will be nice because it brings in some of the convention. I worked on the disability part of it, so we have mainstreamed the Disability Act into it to give backing to what INEC has already been doing. But I argue that what INEC has been doing in providing level field for voters who live with disability is something that can be justified by existing law and constitution. So basically, my argument is, if the President doesn't sign this bill at the last time, INEC should start now rolling out the guideline for the election. INEC has the power to do that, and I'm sure that. But on the more important point about the fragility of democracy, we have seen it across West Africa. In fact, we have seen democracy regression that is now a topic of discussion in international politics, whether democracy is relapsing. So the fact that we don't have clarity on electoral law, the fact that INEC itself is almost like in a law, not knowing where to go, the fact that the ruling party in this country is playing ping pong with a convention, the fact that even the opposition party itself is struggling, the fact that the INEC, the electoral management body, is now housing persons that people are disputing their objectivity and non-partisanship, where there's some kind of adverse selection, removing those who have shown integrity by prosecuting criminals, those who have stood strong, those who understand the knowledge about election. These things are worrisome because Nigeria is not exempted for the free fall happening around it. Democracy is always fragile. And one of the things about democracy is that you move from arrangement to practice to institution. We have not yet institutionalized democracy yet because that requires repeated process of dealing. We've got under Jonathan, we are lucky to have what we now call consolidation. But that consolidation is false. The value system, the sense of political partisanship, the lack of balance in the polity, even poverty itself. Research by political science have shown that level of poverty, inequality speaks more around how democracy fails. So with Nigeria at a high level of poverty and massive inequality, and with the desperation of people in office, and with the lack of independence of counter-Mediterranean institutions like the courts, like the regulatory agencies, the fact that they are easily compromised, the fact that many of them don't even understand the laws and the knowledge guiding their area of operation. This raised concern. I'm more worried about these factors than the president exercising his constitutional right to veto. The point that the National Assembly is self-serving. By the way, why should a National Assembly who wants to be governor, wants to use law to remove his opponent, who is a Minister of Justice or Minister of Transport? Why should you make that bare knuckle attack, using law selfishly and unwisely? If I was Attorney General, basically, I would advise the president not to sign a law that says, look, the advantage that democracy gives you, even the US, presidents, we have super delegates. The political play is not what should regulate with elections. The rules are very clear. If somebody has delegates because he's in power and he has commission wide delegates, go and do politics. Stop using lawmaking to remove politics from its character. It's about persuasion. It's about mobilizing people. It's about fair advantage. The same way you have money, you can finance radio talks and television and adverts. Someone doesn't have money. Should we use law to go and dissent to reorganize all forms of advantage that are not necessarily illegal, that are not necessarily against the law? So I blame the National Assembly for whatever happens to this bill. If they have just overridden the president or just removed that provision, without doing this selfish game, we won't be here. But nevertheless, my word is INEC should rise to the game. INEC is authorized. All the innovations they have made so far derive from the Constitution and the Electoral Act. So whether the president signs or not, INEC should go ahead and roll out the guideline for 2023 election.
Okay, let me, Dr. Madi, I'm sure that, our guest here at the studio has, and I'm sure that we can start a whole argument about level playing field and undue advantage and privileges, if we'd like. But let's wrap up this conversation here. I'm going to throw it over to Lagos for Professor Nanaba's last comments. But we've been speaking with Mr. Austin Aigbe, who's a Senior Program Officer, Center for Democracy and Development. Thank you so much for coming on. And Dr. Sam Amadi is the Director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Dr. Madi, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Over now to the crew in Lagos.
Thank you, Mark. Well, Prof, there is a lot about the law and then the practice of the law. Another angle to this whole conversation are the people who will execute the law. From all of the, clearly we don't seem to have a consensus on whether or not the signing of the bill or not signing of the bill will have any significant impact. But we are less than a year, it would seem, to the general elections, at least by the date that INEC has released already. What do you see happening in the distant future?
I have a feeling that the president will sign the bill because he knows that there's a lot of confidence and trust on him by Nigerians. And there may be some distractions or some concerns he will have. I urge him to find a way to get those issues resolved quickly and have the bill signed. No law on this planet has been perfect. If there are, we have to weigh the weight of those concerns to know whether they should actually stop the signing of the bill. Since the National Assembly had actually shifted and didn't go to override him, they could have done that if they had the will. Let the president sign the bill into law. Other things, we can always amend further again.
Okay.
But I don't want us to begin with protests
In the event that, just a very, very quick one because we have 30 seconds. In the event that the president doesn't sign as you expect, what happens?
If he doesn't sign, the democratic process kicks in. The protests, even lawsuits and all that.
Can you sue the president for reneging on his promise?
Not about promise.
Oh, okay.
It's about the Constitution says the president should sign. If he doesn't sign, the National Assembly, that's what we call mandamus. You can go to court to ask the court to order some public officers to do what they ought to do by law.
After all, former President Goodluck Jonathan amended it in 2015. That's what we're using now. So it's expected that President Buhari will also do similar.
I expect that the president will sign.
Well, I guess it's countdown right now to the day. And it will seem like there are two countdowns now. Countdown to the limited number of days INEC has to work with, and countdown to Mr. President's 30 days.
Yeah.
Well, Professor Paul Ananaba, Senior Advocate of Nigeria.
INEC should not attempt this wholesome arguments going on. Okay. They know that they have limitations.
Absolutely.
And they should work only within the law.
For which reason they themselves have been speaking about that. We've been listening to officers of INEC say that. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Well, we'll take a short break to take on another issue of a lot more importance, perhaps, or not, after now.
We started this conversation on Friday talking about Nigeria's automotive industry. The question is, where are we currently? How much progress have we made, and how have our policies enhanced Nigeria's, the capacity of Nigerians to be able to not just make their vehicles, but also to be able to buy those vehicles. We have with us this morning Mr. Jalani Aliyu, who is the Director General, National Automotive Design and Development Council. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you.
Well, may I ask you, where are we currently with our automotive policy? Because for a number of people, they will say that they have been flip-flops in terms of policy. But for you, who is an operator in the industry, where would you say Nigeria's automotive industry currently stands?
Yes, I think a lot of progress has been made. Let's look a little bit at the history of the automotive sector in the country. We all remember in the 70s and 80s the 504s and the Beetles, Volkswagen, Peugeot, Namco, Leyland were all operating in Nigeria. Then around about 1986, the price of a barrel of crude oil crashed from $26 to below $10 per barrel. That sent the country into a recession. So Nigerians woke up overnight and they could no longer buy those vehicles that were being produced in the country. And those companies had to close shop and leave. What we're implementing now is a National Automotive Industry Development Plan to resuscitate automotive production, and it has done that. So we went from zero production to an installed capacity of 400,000 units per year. We're not there yet, but there's significant activity in local assembly and production of vehicles currently in Nigeria. As we speak, well over $1 billion has been invested by credible companies, Dangote Sino Trucks, Dangote, Peugeot, Innoson, Larry Shutu, Honda. They're all here producing vehicles in the country. So a lot of progress has been made. Yes, we still have a whole lot more to go, but significant progress has been made in the nation's automotive sector.
If my memory serves me well, I think it was about a year ago, there was some complaint about a policy which had come out, which the federal government came up with to encourage Nigerians. They said it was because of the economic hardship. They wanted Nigerians to be able to bring in vehicles. And I know that automotive players in the automotive industry, protested against that, saying that it was counterproductive to their own business because it meant that a lot more Nigerians would prefer to import their cars than buy made in Nigeria goods. Has that now been reversed?
Well, working towards that, you're referring to the 2020 finance bill, which reduced the levy on imported vehicles from 35% down to 5%. This is a temporary measure, and as we review the NAIDP itself, once it comes back from the National Assembly, it's going in as an executive bill. So once it comes back and goes into effect, it will reverse this temporary measure in the best interest of the whole economy, not just the producers, but even the end user.
Well, you say you're working to reverse it, but it certainly must have had its effect. If it was done in 2020 and this is 2022, I'm sure you've had enough time to be able to assess how that has affected those who are currently producing vehicles in the country. Were they taken into account when that policy was made?
It has made a difference because the auto policy itself is a measure to promote local production. So when you make it easier to bring in vehicles, it does affect local production. But we're working very closely with all the relevant stakeholders to make sure that at the end of the day, it's a win-win for everybody.
Can we measure in clear terms just what impact it has had? I mean, you say it has made a difference. You haven't qualified what sort of difference it has made. Is it positive or negative?
It has made it a little bit harder for local producers to compete because they do need that difference when they sell their vehicles compared to those brought in. When that difference is lessened, it makes it harder to compete. But like I mentioned, as we speak, there is a good understanding of what the automotive sector can do or has done to the local economy. So I believe all necessary stakeholders are now working together with us to ensure that what is done is in the best interest of the nation in general.
Okay. So right now, where we stand with despite or in spite of that particular policy, it would seem that still it hasn't discouraged those who are trying to set up plants here in Nigeria. How would you qualify the uptake of made-in-Nigeria vehicles by not just Nigerians, but perhaps even government?
Yes, you're very right. It actually hasn't discouraged investors. Just recently, Dangote Pujo started assembling vehicles in Kaduna, so that is a great development. They're really, like I mentioned, there's an installed capacity to be able to produce up to 400,000 vehicles per year, but patronage has really been very low. We do need more federal government MDAs, more state governments, more government and private institutions to really buy made in Nigeria and assembled in Nigeria vehicles. It has never been a problem. The challenge has never been the ability to build vehicles in the country. The challenge has been the offtake. So we believe government can do more at the federal and state levels. Private institutions can do more. Companies that are working on government projects can do more to really patronize those vehicles assemble or produce in the country. Because we must remember, each time you bring in a fully built vehicle, you are exporting jobs and opportunities. Each time you buy a vehicle assembled or produced in the country, you're creating a better future for Nigeria. So it is imperative that we support the local industry in the best interest of the future of this great nation.
That's right. I mean, it would seem that it's just common sense, it would seem. Interestingly, the gentleman with whom we started this conversation last week, Friday, is a Nigerian lawmaker. And there have been questions we asked him questions as to why lawmakers, because we did notice that there was a conversation amongst lawmakers as to whether or not made-in-Nigeria vehicles was going to be their choice of official cars. And we saw how that conversation went. It never materialized that Nigerian vehicles were going to be, or made-in-Nigeria vehicles are going to be purchased for the use of our lawmakers. So there were questions as to why that wasn't the case. You are very much in the industry. Why do you think that we have to persuade the federal government, for instance, to see the advantage in patronizing or making sure that the vehicles that a lot of our top government functionaries use, maybe even the ones that, are used in other arms of government apart from, say, the executive itself, are made in Nigeria vehicles, which is supposed to be an incentive. Isn't it common sense?
We're doing all that we can, the NADDC and our parent ministry and Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment and all relevant stakeholders to really showcase the advantages of made in Nigeria vehicles. One of the things that people really need to acknowledge and understand now is that these vehicles are put together or assembled in Nigeria meet global standards. When a Honda or a Hyundai is put together in Nigeria or produced here, or when Innocent produces his vehicles here, all these companies must meet minimum global standards, because now the way vehicles and companies operate is global and regional.
Do you fear that that could be the reason they are reluctant to take up the vehicles, that perhaps they do not quite meet up with the standards?
Or the vehicle do.
Or do you think it's a matter of design? I mean, you are also looking at design. Is it a question of how the cars themselves look?
The cars, a vehicle made in Nigeria, like I was about to say, a Hyundai made here and a Hyundai made in South Korea are the same. Because these companies now are global, they're international, and they do not circumvent when it comes to standards of vehicles. There's no compromise. So we will continue to promote Nigerian vehicles, and we'll continue to make people understand that these vehicles are as good as the vehicles made anywhere. Maybe there's a lack of that fact, but that's a reality. These vehicles are the same. We've moved. Probably when you say a vehicle made in Nigeria, people expect it to be a ramshackle vehicle that looks like it came out of the 80s or 70s. It's not. A lot of the vehicles that you see on the road in Abuja and around the country are actually assembled or made here. So we will continue to promote how good they are, how comparative they are positively to vehicles made from anywhere around the world.
Well, I'm asking you that question, I mean, about design, because I was saying that I don't know if you've done any research into the sort of vehicles that Nigerians prefer. I do know that oftentimes, even for people who buy second-hand vehicles, there are questions as to, oh, where did you buy it from? Or what spec is it? You know, and there's always a preference for the American spec, for instance. I do not know if you've done any research to find out perhaps why Nigerians, and this is minus government, but why Nigerians themselves might not be able to take up the made in Nigeria vehicles, or might not want to take up the Nigerian vehicles.
I perfectly understand. I remember a couple of decades ago, the vehicles that came out of the US had powered windows and air conditioning, power steering, and the Peugeots that we had didn't really have much of that. Or some of the vehicles that were made for Africa, even though they were made outside Africa, when they were made for Africa, they were below our standards. There was something that was lacking in them. Those were the old days. Today, the way vehicles are designed and produced, there's a certain level of features and safety embedded in the vehicles that's global. So those days are gone. A vehicle made here, an Innoson, has all these features that other vehicles do. And when you talk about vehicles, you're talking about levels. You know, you have entry-level, mid-level, luxury cars. So that is what determines what features a vehicle has, not necessarily whether it's made in Nigeria or Japan. So those days are gone. Those American specs, and actually a Nigerian specs vehicle would be better for anybody because the suspension, the power of the air conditioning, because of our extreme conditions. When these vehicles are made in Nigeria for the Nigerian climate, they are acclimatized, they're homologated to be most in tune with our extreme terrain and geography and climate.
It's interesting to know that about the suspensions of the vehicles. But generally, I imagine that a lot of the vehicles that are made will be for entry level.
In Nigeria?
Yes.
No, there's a whole gamut of vehicles, entry level, mid-level, and luxury level. Commercial trucks, commercial vans, all different types of makes and models.
So what then is preventing our government from taking up these vehicles en masse?
Like I mentioned, we'll continue to, we've promoted our Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Nia Adebayo, just last week promoted Nigerian-made vehicles to all the executive governors of Nigeria, making them aware of the need for them to patronize made in Nigeria vehicles. This was at the National Economic Council meeting. So we will continue to support such promotion. I think the more we do that, the more the decision makers and leaders will understand that these vehicles are good for them and that we must patronize our local industry.
Okay, let me flip this to Lagos. I understand my colleagues have questions for you. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Marco. Well, Mr. Aliyu, one of the questions that comes to my mind readily, first of all, is to ask you, at what point did we even jeopardize the previous policies that we had at the federal level? Well, in some preceding governments had legislated or maybe issued a policy that only Nigeria assembled or produced vehicles should be used by government at all levels. Well, yes, this was under the military governments at the time, but I don't know because I don't remember those policies being reversed in any way, manner, shape, or form. So at what point did we stop to execute that policy as it was back then?
Yes. Well, there's what we have. We have the executive orders 3 and 5 that are in effect. I think the challenge is the lack of patronage or the MDAs that are being asked that are mandated by these orders to buy these made in Nigeria vehicles and products aren't doing that. So the problem isn't with the policy as per se, or with the orders, or with the ability to offer these vehicles. It has been more of a personal choice not to buy them, which really shouldn't be the case. I believe we need to be more patriotic, both as individuals, as government entities and bodies, to really promote and support a local industry. Because when we do that, we're supporting our own economy, we're creating jobs, we're creating a better future, not just for ourselves, but for all those coming after us. As we review the automotive policy, which is now underway, and when it comes out of the National Assembly and is signed into law, we believe that will further make it harder not to buy these made in Nigeria vehicles. So we will continue to work with all necessary stakeholders. I think there's a lack of understanding of how imperative it is to support local economy. So we'll continue to work with all local and international stakeholders to ensure that the vehicles produced continue to be really at par, and that all these executive orders are not flaunted.
Well, it's very interesting where you say that MDAs are not doing what an order of the president, states. I believe that there will be some approving authority somewhere, maybe the permanent secretary in the ministry, department, or agency, or the general manager or director general of any of those agencies. Well, that's work for them. I'm sure you may not be able to speak to that. But you talked about the lack of understanding of what's in the whole gamut of encouraging this policy of government to work. How many people potentially can this automotive industry in Nigeria employ? The primary, direct or indirect employment that you often speak about. Perhaps that can be some form of impetus to champion this patronage.
Yes. With an installed capacity of over 400,000 units per year, and at the current level of production, we have about 50,000 direct and indirect jobs in Nigeria as a result of the automotive industry. This is at this current level of production. So the multiplier effect, if we are able to increase local production, if local patronage gives local production the opportunity to increase, I think we're looking at maybe nothing less than about 600,000 jobs within a year or so, if these companies are given the chance to operate at maximum capacity. And with the automotive sector, for every one job on the factory floor, you create at least 10 jobs down the value chain. So the multiplier effects are really huge. The automotive sector has the ability to really add a lot of value to the economy, create a lot of jobs, and at the end of the day, create meaningful opportunities for people at all levels of employment.
So, Installed capacity 400,000, actual production, I mean, the Vice President had put it at, was it 14,000 about last year or 2 years ago, so clearly a huge gap. But let me come at this in another route. I mean, you're well known for your work at General Motors, GM, and I mean, coming from Nigeria, Sokoto State, going all the way to the top, designing really nice vehicles, then coming back home. Clearly, you'll have seen, you know, differences. You'll have learned, okay, this is how things operate there, and this is how things operate here. I mean, in terms of government support policies and patronage and the rest. How would you describe, you know, the experience for you leaving GM, now coming to work with government and trying to champion this cause? What has been the perhaps biggest difference or challenge for you to grapple with coming here?
Well, my love for cars and the automotive industry started at a very early stage. They say I was bitten by the bug. So I had always wanted to be a car designer, and looked around, and there weren't any schools in Nigeria or Africa in general to study that. So I traveled to the United States. I got an opportunity to study at the College for Creative Studies. When I left to go to the US, it wasn't because I was tired and I wanted to leave Nigeria. I left because I wanted to better myself in the hopes that one day I'd get the opportunity to add value to my home country. Working for GM was a great experience. I had the opportunity to design a number of vehicles, including the Chevrolet Volt electric car. And when I got this opportunity to add value to my home nation, it's something I couldn't say no to at all, because I've always looked forward to that opportunity. I'm very glad I'm back home. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to play my small role in making Nigeria better. Yes, there are challenges everywhere, but I believe one must never be a nation, a society, must never be defined by its current challenges. It can only be defined by its dreams and aspirations and by what it can achieve. It's never about what we have now, but it's about what can we create, what better opportunities can we create for our nation. So I believe there are no impossibilities, God willing. There's only a better Nigeria to build. So I'm very excited and happy to be back here. Yes, there are challenges, but we must all work together to resolve those issues and create a better nation for all of us now and for generations to come after us.
Okay, well, you haven't quite spoken to any of the challenges that you have encountered, and I can, leave that, perhaps for later. But let me quickly ask you, do you think that we made the right choices in terms of the kind of cars that we have made for our people? Because, there are questions as to the buying capacity, the economic capacity of many Nigerians who desire to own vehicles. Are our cars, made in Nigeria cars, affordable enough for the average worker to be able to own one?
You see, like they say, life is a journey, and a lot of things there's a learning process and there's evolutionary process in a lot of things. There is need to provide vehicles that are less expensive. And yes, there also is need to provide vehicles that would be more in tune with the culture, climate, terrain, and economic structure. And that is why our agency, the NADDC, is currently working on 2 vehicle designs. We've designed the vehicles. We're now in the product development and engineering phase. These are vehicles specifically that we sat down, acknowledged and understood the actual challenges that Nigerians face in transportation. So we came up with these 2 vehicles. I may not be able to go too much in detail on them because of confidentiality, but these are vehicles that would really fit the bill. We believe they are the perfect mousetrap that would address these issues of affordability, attainability, and usability in our extreme environments. And we will also continue, we've started to continue to discuss with the stakeholders that produce vehicles on these types of vehicles, like you mentioned, that would really address these issues. We do need vehicles that are cheaper. We do need vehicles that are even more in tune with the extreme environment. It's a journey, and we'll continue to do that. We also hope that there's more R&D both within Nigeria and outside Nigeria to really design, develop, produce, and deliver those vehicles that would be the most applicable as per our extreme conditions.
Well, you have said it's a journey. We intend to stay with you on that journey, and we hope that you'll be back here to give us updates on how that journey is going. We have to thank you for coming on this morning. Mr. Jelani Aliyu is the Director General, National Automotive Design and Development Council, NADDC. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you.
Well, we can see your mails and comments now, and we'll start with the tweets from Professor Enakena. He says, on the automotive industry, for Nigerian businesses to actually grow, they must desist from pedantic views about what is produced on the continent. We must look within and patronize what we produce. This will create employment and comparative advantage in world business.
Famous Timileyi on this one says, government should encourage made-in-Nigeria vehicles by giving incentives to both manufacturers and buyers and users. Government should make it mandatory for her agencies to use it as their official vehicles. With this, we can safely build. We can be safe and build the Naira.
I'll take a look at this tweet from SJ Onu saying, I agree, this is about the conversation we had earlier on the electoral bill. I agree that the biggest challenge to our electoral jurisprudence are the duo of senior lawyers and collaborative SC, is our Supreme Court. Based on current constitutional provision, we don't need this amendment to do electronic transmission. This fact came up in 2019, PEPC and SC refused. I see you're using those acronyms. Well, step it down a bit for those who might not know it. There you go.
And Festus Akimboyewa says it's desirable for the president to sign the electoral bill, but the civil society must be careful not to be hijacked and used by politicians. Their proposed action tomorrow will amount to blackmail.
And a mail came from Boniface who says, on the proposed electoral bill, it is not necessary. It's not absolutely correct that protesters never achieved anything in trying to cajole the government of the day to carry out the people's wish. Just this year, the threat by NLC to go on a national strike forced the government to go back on their planned decision to remove the fuel subsidy.
Well, never say never. That's our program this beautiful Monday morning. Thank you so much for sending your comments and your tweets as well. I'm Malkwel Bin Yusuf.
And please endeavor to buy a made-in-Nigeria product, car, consumables, whatever. I'm Kayode Okikiodu.
That means prayers alone won't do it. Patronize Nigerian. Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.